How serious is this warning? Is the UN truly on the brink of collapse, or do you think this is just a pressure tactic that is aimed at forcing member states to ultimately pay up?
Yeah, it's a fundraising move. He's trying to drum up some money. I think they are having real financial problems. I think they're a result of mismanagement and a crazy assumption that budgets would just be able to grow and grow and grow, and that you could not deliver services to member states and expect them to keep paying. The United States pays by far the largest share of the UN's budget. At the same time, the United States is on the losing end of General Assembly votes almost all the time. The UN pursues woke DEI agendas that are clearly, against the interests of the U.S. government, at least the current U.S. government. Um, so I think the expectation that they'll have everything paid for without accountability was a mistaken one.
The U.S. has continued to argue that the UN is inefficient, that it's politically biased, like you just mentioned, of course. But critics say that Washington is ultimately hollowing out the system. Who has the stronger case here, and what leverage does the United States really have?
First of all, the system could use some hollowing or trimming. UN budgets have grown consistently despite anything and without any real measurable return. There's this idea that if the UN does something, it can't be done by anyone else but the UN. But provision of humanitarian services, other kinds of charitable causes can and are done better and more efficiently by other organizations or private entities. So the UN needs a significant haircut, and it needs a fundamental restructuring. Perhaps the only way to force them to do this is through this method. I want to point out that the U.S. contribution of mandatory dues to the UN is a small fraction of what the U.S. pays to the UN. In addition to its mandatory dues, which is now withholding, the U.S. pays billions and billions of dollars for other UN programs. So the U.S. remains the largest funder of the United Nations, but it needs to show its taxpayers what are they getting for the money.
Right. Obviously, we've been seeing here in I-24 News, we've been covering intensely the Board of Peace, obviously, which was created or initially created to tackle the crisis in the Gaza Strip, but then kind of seemed to take on its own form and is essentially being promoted by some as an alternative to the United Nations. Is it, in fact, an alternative to the United Nations?
Nothing is an alternative to the United Nations. And by what I mean is nothing would be improvement. There's this idea that we have the United Nations and without it, things would be worse, which, of course, is a conjecture. I don't think history strongly supports that. The Board of Peace is designed to deal with certain conflict. But it also does not have its own compulsory mechanism to get nations to comply. And really, there is no compulsory mechanism in international law. So the Board of Peace, I think, is designed to deal with certain conflicts in a way that's better, more efficient than the United Nations. That doesn't mean it's a replacement, because I don't think President Trump wants to replace the United Nations.
Interesting.
That would be replacing failure.
All right. Well, I want to talk about what this means for the future of the organization. If the funding crisis does, in fact, continue, what would break first? Are we talking about peacekeeping missions, humanitarian aid, human rights monitoring? Obviously, there have been a lot of concerns about what this means in terms of humanitarian aid, but ultimately, who will be the most badly affected?
So a lot of these programs have their own budgets. Peacekeeping has its own budget. Lots of humanitarian programs have their own budget. I think the first to pay the price should, of course, be the salaries of the bureaucrats at the Secretariat and the other UN agencies. They need a haircut, and they need probably layoffs. The UN is, most organizations go through periods of layoffs. The UN is overdue to really look and see who do they need. Not the UN has this idea that just because the UN does something, it's essential. That is not the case. And they need to come up with the priorities to fit their budget, not the budget to fit their priorities.